Hi, and in this video we're going to look at inputting an open-ended question into a survey, getting the answers that have been entered during the survey, coding them and putting them back into QPSMR Insight for analysis. So we're going to start by just putting in a gender question or something very straightforward. So I'm just going to have another question in here that we can use as an extra question. Okay, and now I'm going to put in my open-ended question. So I'm going to put in a question, call it question 1, and I'm going to pick verbatim text question. Now that means that the only thing that be answered here will actually be just the text that's been submitted either to the interviewer or on the paper questionnaire. So I'm going to say, why do you say that to this question? And there's nothing else to fill in here at all. We'll just complete it like that, unless of course you wanted a filter to exclude certain people from answering the particular question. Alright, so that's done the 2 questions on my questionnaire. And what's going to happen to the text that's entered for those open questions, or the verbatim questions, is that they're going to go off to a CSV spreadsheet so that they can be coded, and then the answers are going to be pulled back into QPS after coding. Now we need a question that we can pull those answers back into, and we don't want to ask it on the survey, we just want it set as a dummy question so that we can use it later on. Now the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to set up a variable here, which is an empty variable. So I'm going to call this variable false bar. I'll make it single, call the text false, and the definition, I'm just going to type in the syntax F. I could click on that button there, otherwise it would do the same thing. And you can see it's making me a variable with one code in it that's false. So in other words, nobody can get into that code. And now I can insert a filter which is people who gave that false code, which would be nobody, of course. So I'm setting up an impossible filter. Now I can use that filter as a filter for a question that we don't want on data entry. So I'm going to set up a question called Q1 coded, and this is going to be the question I'm going to code my open-ended answers to so that they can be used in analysis. I'm going to call this Q1 coded. And rather than go into responses, I can allocate the number of responses that I might want to use for coding my question. Now, the advice here is that always allow a generous amount, but don't be ridiculous. So you could put 9999 in there, which would make a very big empty question that you've got to then have, and would actually slow runs down. If you had several of them, you really would slow your runs down, possibly quite significantly with a big data set. I think for a question, probably 99 is enough. Sometimes you might think that 20 is enough. Always go a little bit too high, but as I say, don't go ridiculous and put in 9999 because you're just going to make a big question that's going to be mainly empty. So I'm going to actually pick 40 here, as I think that's enough responses. And what that's doing, it's made an empty question with 40 questions. And I'm going to apply that false variable to it so that on data entry, nobody can actually answer that question. It'll just be like an empty question in there that will always be skipped past because nobody will fulfill the filter that's been applied to that particular question. Alright, so I'm now ready with my questionnaire. I'm going to save this questionnaire and I'm going to do some data entry. So let's open a data window. It is warning me there's no ZZ entries in this questionnaire for data entry, which is perfectly fine. There's a separate video that shows you how to use ZZ entries for collecting other information. So let's pass on from that and let's open up my data file, and we can just now start containing some data. So serial number 1, I'm going to pick male, and for the open-ended answer, I'm going to enter it comes in a green box and is very useful. So that's the first open-ended answer I'm giving, green box, and very useful. On to the second interview, we'll do a female this time. We'll put this time the box is green, but it is too big. And the third respondent, I'm going to say is female. I'm going to say big box. And that's all it's going to say. All right, so that's my answers to my 3 questionnaires. And I'm going to close data entry now. And if we go to the folder where this data has been entered, we'll find that we've got the data, or the open-ended answers rather, sitting in this Excel file called open-ended question, which is the name of my QDF, verbatim.csv. And if we open that up, we can see that we've got the data that was entered from our 3 questionnaires. It comes in a green box. It's very useful. The box is green, but it's too big, and it's a big box. So now I can start to code this data. And of course, if there's more than one open-ended question, they'd all come out in this one file. It would be probably more convenient to sort them on entry so that you had all the question 1 answers and all the question 5 answers, or whatever it is you had in that survey. But now we can start to give codes to this. So it comes in a green box and is useful. So I'm going to make that a 1 and a 2. So I'm going to do green box as 1, useful as 2. This one here is a green box but too big. That's a 1 and a 3. And this one here is a big box, which is a 4. So I've ended up with 4 codes here, 2 of which mention the green. 1 mentions it's useful. 1 says it's too big, and 1 says it's just a big box. And I'm going to change the entry here to Q1 coded, which you may remember was the question that we allocated that was empty, that I'm going to code these answers back to. So now I'm going to save this spreadsheet, and I'm going to save it with the word coded on the end, because I've now coded this data. I'm going to save it and close it, and there's my answers with the coded and having changed Q1 to Q1 coded. Now I can switch back to my QDF, and now I can pull that data back into this question, but I might as well at this point as well take off this filter, because that filter was only in there to stop it being asked at data entry. So let's go back into this now and stop applying that filter, because actually I want everyone to answer this question. Let's save it. And now I'm going to pull the data back from the coded spreadsheet. So I'm going to go to data, open the data window, open up my data file, and now I'm going to update the data. So I'm going to update the data from a CSV file, which was that coded file we made. It's going to make a backup for me. I'm going to pick this file here. I want the selected format, which is what it's detected automatically, because I'm only updating certain entries, indeed Q1 coded, so I click OK. It's confirming that it's found all the data it needs, the serial number, the entry and the value. It's ignoring all the other columns. Do I wish to carry on? Yes, I do. I close, and now if I go to my first questionnaire, you can see I've got 1 and 2 being picked. And if I go to the next respondent, we would find that the next code was selected, or the different codes were selected. All I've got to do now is put in the correct codes here rather than what it's allocated, which are these empty ones. So this is green box. Second code was useful. The third one was too big, and the fourth one was just this big. And indeed, if I've got these codes in a spreadsheet, I can update these texts automatically from a spreadsheet as well. That's perfectly allowed. There's an update texts from a CSV file, so if I put those into a CSV file, I could update that and just update from that spreadsheet, which might be more convenient if I had a long list. So now I can do a table, I can go into quick tables, and I can see my coded data. Let's analyze it by gender. And here now we can see that 2 people mentioned green box, 1 said useful, 1 said too big, and 1 said big. And so from that verbatim question, I've now ended up with coded data that I can analyze by gender or any other questions on my questionnaire. So that completes this video on how to handle verbatim or open-ended questions in QPSMR Insight.